Hello everyone and welcome to the second tutorial series in my CSS miniseries collection. Now in this tutorial series we will be going over CSS Flexbox, or CSS Grid, as opposed to the CSS Flexbox miniseries which just concluded. Now as a quick recap, CSS Flexbox is for creating one-dimensional layout like this, item 1, 2, 3, all in a straight line. For example, you take a look at the Google site here, we have the About, Store, and then Gmail images, and then we have these icons here. This is a Flexbox layout because it's all in one line generally. Versus a CSS Grid is more of a complete 2D layout, which basically you can design an entire website in a CSS Grid. You can have the header and then the footer and then all this. So as opposed to a Flexbox, which may be just this header here as one line, this whole thing together is a CSS Grid. And it is one way, like I said, that you can design entire websites. You don't have to design it in a grid format, but you can. So we're going to go ahead and get started by setting up our development environment, which is the kind of environment that we will be coding and working in. And we are using an IDE called VSCode. You don't have to use this. If you have your own IDE, you can go ahead and use that and follow along. But I will quickly be going over how to install, and I will leave a chapter if you want to skip straight into the grid. So to get started, we want to install VS Code, which is this programming IDE right here. So we type in VS Code into Google, and then we come here to this download button, so this download tab. And once you're here, you can go ahead and install the version of VS Code that's for your operating system. So I'll install Windows, for example, and then it will, start downloading here. And I already was installing earlier. And then we will go ahead and just close that, but you will want to run that installer, and once it's installed it should have an icon that's similar to this, except it'll be blue because I'm using a different version. But so yeah, once you open up VS Code, it'll take a look and it'll look like this. It'll just be blank. To get started, you want to go here to File and then hit Open Folder, and then you want to open up your code folder wherever you'll be storing your code that you're writing. And then once it opens up, it'll look something like this. You might want to click on New File later, but I just have this right now. So I'm going to go ahead and check off installing VS Code. And then the first thing you want to do after opening up your folder, you want to go here to Extensions. So it'll be this button here with the 3 squares and then the 1 square sticking out. And then you want to basically come here and search in HTML CSS support. And then once you're here, click on this and install. There's a green install button. For example, I'm going to open up a different one. There will be this green install button, but instead it'll be on this extension here. And then once you're done with that, you want to go ahead and search live server like this. And then again, there will be that green install button to install this. And then lastly, once you're done with that, go ahead and search auto rename tag and install this with the green button. And this, again, all of these extensions are generally for use when programming our websites in HTML and CSS. Overall, they just add to the experience and make it easier to code in these languages. For example, auto rename tag will close your HTML, or will, when you edit the name of a opening or closing tab or tag, it will edit the other one for you. So you type in hello on one, it'll update it on the other one, basically. And then here on live server, it just allows us to write our website and see it update live on the website itself. And then this is just for some useful stuff regarding HTML and CSS. So once we have this all installed, we're going to go ahead and actually start creating our website. So come here to New File and then type in index.html. And once you're in here, go ahead and type exclamation point, and you'll see Emmet abbreviation, hit enter. And this will set up a basic website template right here. Now, just to make sure that this is working, we will create a quick h1 tag, hello world, And then if you've installed that live server program, you might need to reload by going to, command palette, which let me find where it is, Control-Shift-P. Should be somewhere here. Although actually, if you can't see it, which I do not actually remember where it is, you can go ahead and type in Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P, and that'll open up this command palette. And then type in reload space window, and then just do that. And then once that reloads, it'll quickly just reload your window, and then you should see here on the bottom a little Go Live button, which as soon as this sync goes away, it'll show up. This Go Live button right here, and you can click on that, and it will open up a live server, which is basically our website. So if I update this right here to say hello, or just to say goodbye world instead, it will update it here, and then if I change it back and save, it'll change it back to hello. So we're going to go ahead and start off straight with our grid. Now again, I am assuming that you have basic HTML and CSS knowledge. If you do not, I have a tutorial series here on YouTube called Introduction to Web Development. You can watch that and get your bearings with HTML and CSS, and then come back to this tutorial to learn grid. So we're going to start off by creating a div tag, and then we're going to give that an ID of grid. And then on the inside, we are going to say div. We're going to create another div with no ID, but we're going to say grid item. And then I'm just going to copy this and copy it a bunch of times. And then we can even update a number. We can say grid item 1, grid item 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So once I save this, notice by default HTML kind of groups items like this, one after another on top of each other, but we're going to change this with the grid layout. So the first step in doing this will be adding our style sheet, which we create a link :CSS, and that will add a link to our style sheet, which we will create by going style.css as a new file. Now once we're in here, we want to select our grid by doing #grid, since we have our ID of grid here. And then we can say display is grid. And notice once I save this like this, it doesn't change anything. And that's the point. By doing just display grid, you're just setting it up to be grid, but it doesn't actually do anything until you configure it. Now as a quick helper, we are going to say grid, and then if you know CSS pseudo selectors, there's a pseudo selector called nth child, which is basically, if you take a look here at our HTML, we have children of this grid here, and when we're saying nth child, we want to apply a style to every certain number of children. That way we can apply a style to half of these, for example. So we're going to say nth child to n, which basically means every other child, and then we're going to say background color is red. And we're just going to, let's go ahead and soften that a little bit. Let's just make this red 200, 00 maybe. Or actually, let me look up a quick colors right here. Sure, let's just make it a lighter red, basically. So we're just going to give every second child this color here. And what this is doing, 2n, is saying every second child. Because 2, if I just put 2 here, it'll just select the second child. But if I put 2n, this is like math, 2 times n, which is basically every other child. And then if I come here and say grid again, nth child, nth dash child, and then say 2n plus 1, that will create a background color, and then let's give it a greenish background color of some sort. Let's give it a light green, and then let's go ahead and paste. And this will basically, 2n plus 1 means offset by 1, so every other item that is not red, basically. So yeah, we're just creating this green, red to kind of differentiate the items. So once we create this display grid here, we will use two kind of properties, grid template columns, and then grid template rows. Now again, let's just say, for example, we wanted to have a 3-column layout. Let's say 100 pixels, 100 pixels, 100 pixels, and then let's just say 50 pixels, 50 pixels. Once I save this, it will arrange itself into our grid layout. And I just realized we have 8 items. Let's go ahead and add a 9th item just to make this complete. 9. There you go. So now we have our 9 items. And notice, actually, I forgot to specify a 3rd row, so let's create a 50 pixel row like that. So notice by saying 100, 100, 100, we are creating 3 columns, each with 100 pixels. And then we are creating 3 rows, each with 50 pixels, just like by doing that. And that is the basics of creating a grid layout, which coming here is a div with divs, and then background colors, grid template. Now, there is another property we could add to grid template. We could create a property called auto, for example. And by using auto, if I save this, notice that these grid items will shrink and expand to fill the remaining space. So this is already adding some responsiveness into our website. And again, responsiveness means when your website will update based on the size of the window. For example, on a phone, it'll get smaller, and on a computer, it'll get bigger. Now, this is the auto. Now, we don't have to use auto again. We could just change this back to 100 pixels, but then it's confined to 300 pixels wide. If we do add an auto here, it will take up the entire space. So that's just a fun thing to notice. And then to make this kind of look better, let's go ahead and just add auto here. To make this look better, we could add something called a grid-gap, which would allow us, for example, 10 pixels, would allow us to create a gap in between the items. So if I made this a 5 pixel, notice now we have just this little nice gap. So yeah, this looks nice, and it's a basic grid layout. So that was basically our introduction into CSS Grid. In the next video, we are going to be going over more advanced properties on making this grid look better, customizing it more. Because for now, this is kind of limited. We can specify some rows, specify some columns, and kind of get some responsiveness, but for the most part, it's a static grid, and it doesn't do much. This doesn't necessarily look too much better. It is pretty cool that we can actually create rows and columns, but that's about the extent of what we know right now. In the future, there is you can reorder the items, you can make them all grow instead of just one growing at the same rate. You could grow them at different rates, stuff like that. Similar things that you would find in a CSS Flexbox layout. So stay tuned for that. If you want to see the upcoming videos in this mini-series, go ahead and check out the playlist, which is linked in the description, and I'm uploading daily. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications whenever I post new videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.